Hello, everyone. I'm Barbara Ham-Lee. It seems every day there's some new development involving the Trump administration that causes angst for some in America. Just this week, more about the investigation of Russian interference in the 2016 presidential election, the promise to coal miners that they are going back to work with the signing of a new executive order, to Mr. Trump taking credit in a tweet that he is creating new jobs in the auto industry, except plans for those jobs were announced years ago. So what's really important? What should we pay attention to, and what is just noise? Assistant Professor of Political Science and History, Dr. Eric Claville is here with the Claville Report. Another View is next. Stay tuned.
Discussing today's topics from an African American perspective, this is Another View.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Another View. I'm Barbara Ham-Lee. Before we get started today, we just want to say a very special hello to some guests that are joining us in our Another View studio today. Dawn Merkel is with us from Wilcox and Savage, Dr. Yarden Shabazz, and Maya Reed, who is an 11th grader, both from Indian River High School in Chesapeake. So they're here to see how radio is put together. So welcome, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate this. So I'm a journalist and a self-confessed news junkie, and I have to tell you that I find myself scouring newspapers and watching news programs to keep up with all the twists and turns happening during the first 100 days of the Trump administration. But I wonder how many of you are like me, or are most people just going on about their daily lives and not really paying attention? And where's the middle ground? I'm probably on the overload side. The other side is complete apathy. So where's the middle? How do we discern what's really important, what will have the greatest impact on our lives, and what is simply noise? We are always happy to have with us attorney and assistant professor of political science and history at Hampton University, Dr. Eric Claville, with his Claville Report. Hey, Eric, how are you?
Hi, Barbara. Glad to be here.
Good. So I know I'm on the overload side because I'm following every little detail, but of all the major things that are going on right now, as an observer of history and so forth, what's the most important? What do we need to be paying attention to?
Well, with this administration, it is quite a bit, and of course, coming out of the election and looking at what has taken place. I think what we should really be paying attention to, if I could break it down to three things, is number one, we should really be looking at these Russia connections that are real. Okay, those are real. Secondly, we also should be looking at the legislation that Congress is putting forth to turn back the clock on a lot of protections that individuals receive through civil rights, funding for states, and so forth. And then finally, we should be paying attention to the political environment that has been created, first starting with the election of President Barack Obama, and then exacerbated and really turned up a tremendous notch with the election of Donald Trump. It has become extremely toxic. It has caused the country within itself to become more toxic in their relationships with individuals on a daily basis. And the world is looking at us. A lot of times when we're here in America, you become isolated and thinking that it's just us. But keep in mind that the United States is a beacon of light. However, the world is looking at this beacon of light saying, is it dimming? And is it time to look elsewhere?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's take it in those three different areas, starting with the Russia connection. Why should Joe Citizen care about if Russia interfered, if it didn't interfere, if people are asking for immunity? I mean, there's all these twists and turns, but what's the root thing that we most need to pay attention to as we examine whether or not Russia was involved? And as you say, it's very real.
It is. Well, first of all, we have to look at who Russia is. Okay, Russia is also the former Soviet Union. Okay, and I understand that a lot of people don't like to pay attention to history, but the Cold War wasn't too far away. Wasn't that
long ago?
Right,
yeah.
That too distant. So the average person can remember, that time period. And the Cold War was a situation where We would have nuclear war or nuclear holocaust and combat drills at school, and we would also get this message that the Russians are coming. They're going to, or the Soviets are coming. Movies were made about it. I remember a movie called Red Dawn, where comrades from Russia, parachuted into a town to take it over and things of that nature. So
And everybody was worried about the button being
exactly,
pushed. Yes.
exactly. I mean, so you have these two superpowers that came out of World War II that established themselves. It was the Soviet Union and the United States. Under President Reagan, of course, we entered into Star Wars, which ended up bankrupting the Soviet Union because we outspent them as far as defense goes. And then, of course, you have these former Soviet blocs, these independent nations that were captured by the Soviet Union that became free. Okay, those are the nations in the Baltics and the Balkans. These are also nations such as Ukraine that we've talked about, what's been talked about in the news, especially with the annexation of Crimea. Fast forward, Russia is led by Vladimir Putin. Vladimir Putin is a former KGB. He is also one who has been able to capture the government and also the business of Russia, and which means that he is a dictator. For the most part, whatever he says goes, and if you don't agree with it, you're going to go one way or the other. So with Russia, they want to tear down the United States. He wants to discredit the United States. He knows that he cannot destroy the United States militarily. So therefore, if you destroy the belief that people have in a system or someone else, then that in effect will destroy an empire or nation from within. Money is not power. Military strength is really not power, but belief is power. Because if you don't, when a president gets on the air, and if he makes a statement and you don't believe that person, that leader of your country, you're not going to react in a positive way.
So you're saying that by Russia inserting itself into the presidential election, having us to have these conversations that are being held now, that is tearing down the trust of the American people.
Exactly. Democracy is the most tenuous form of government that we've ever had in our man's history. And the reason why it's the most tenuous is because you have so many different factions that are involved, so many interest groups, so many different people, and so forth. But it all works together because we're a nation of laws. And we respect the law no matter what the outcome, even though we work to change things for the better. And that's the one thing that I think that we have still working in our favor, that the U.S. Supreme Court, even in very, very trying times, they always got it right. Whether it be the Board of Brown v. Board of Education, where they got it right there. Whether it be the case where we had the waterboarding and torture, they got it right there in overturning President Bush's order. So they tend to get it right because we are a nation of laws and so forth. Finally, as it relates to Russia, we also have a president in office who admires, he stated this himself, he admires how Vladimir Putin is a leader. He said he did not admire how Barack Obama was a leader, but he admires Vladimir Putin. He also is one that has done business in Russia, which is the reason why he won't release his in-depth tax returns, which will show the businesses and the relationships that he has there. No one does business in Russia unless Vladimir Putin allows you to do business there. Finally, if you take a look and go back on yesterday and take a look at the former FBI agent testimony before the Senate, he even stated, he said, listen, we have to pay attention to this because this person just didn't put hackers to meddle in one election, but they played in it. They tried to overturn votes. They tried to put out news that would deter individuals. And finally, he said, only thing you have to do is follow the trail of dead Russians that are connected to this investigation. There have been Russians who have been assassinated over the last several months in order to not give up, information. And we'll talk about, individuals on our side with Flynn and Manafort and Kushner and others in just a moment.
And there was a gentleman, and I can't recall his name right now, but who was poisoned twice from Russia. And so that idea of getting rid of people so that they cannot testify or they cannot bring forth what is actually happening is frightening.
But it's real. And and keep in mind, we have short memories. And I've said this before on another Claville Report. I said that the season that we're in, the time period is 1964, 65, 66 all over again, because we have a time where we have a lot of civil uprisings, and we're going to have more civil disobedience. That's going to happen. We've also have a time period where the political environment was kind of poisoned slightly. And also, we've had a lot of assassinations during that time period. The Kennedy brothers. We also had King assassinated. You had Malcolm X assassinated. We go back, Medgar Evers, and many, many others who were killed because they were standing up trying to change things. And also, we had a war that was going on that was very unpopular, the Vietnam War. Right now, we've been in Afghanistan for 12 years. We have a congressman out of North Carolina that's trying to bring up a bill to bring us out of Afghanistan. We have troops located in Iraq. We have a $65 million embassy there. We're not leaving Iraq, and that's a place where we have radical Islamists that are training every single day and recruiting and creating terrorist acts within those areas, and that are known today by ISIS and ISIL. So that's a hotbed for us as well.
So, Eric, as a layperson, though, because if you start getting into all these twists and turns, yesterday Flynn asked for immunity,
Yeah.
and tomorrow somebody's going to say something else, and all of that. How, and the whole idea about the congressional committee versus the Senate committee and who's doing what and all of that. What is that critical for us to understand, or is the outcome what's most important?
Well, the process is critical. Persons are calling this Watergate too. I'm also calling it that as well. If we remember what happened during Watergate time, in fact, PBS NewsHour was actually created because of Watergate, in order for people to understand what was going on. We need that again, where you're showing the process and explaining the process, not injecting opinion, but showing the process to the average American so they can see what is happening. Yes, both the House and the Senate, which are separate houses of Congress, they have powers to investigate. They have identical committees, okay? Because when you pass laws, hopefully everyone remembers the cartoon bit on Saturday morning, I'm a bill, just on
yes,
a bill.
I'm a bill,
Sitting
that's
on
on a
Capitol
bill,
Hill.
absolutely.
So it tells you the process in which the bill goes through to become law. With that being the case, they have power to investigate. Same thing happened during the time of Richard Nixon during his Watergate hearing and ultimate declaration of impeachment by those houses. You also had the FBI investigating. So more than likely, each house is vying for which is the most credible. Okay, and we already see that the Senate has kind of got a leg up, especially with Representative Nunes, who was also a part of the Trump transition team when he came in, and the things that he's done to obstruct or cast a dark cloud over the independents and the lack of influence on their committee. But the Senate has come to the point where they are going to be the most credible. Richard Burr out of North Carolina and also Senator Mark Warner here out of Virginia. They've both had press conferences and said, we have a job to do, and we're going to do it not only with integrity, but without any allegiances to anyone.
So when we say Russia was messing in the election, what does that mean? Sure.
So what Russia was actually doing, they were doing several things, and this is going to come out in the investigations by the Senate and also the FBI. First, they hired a bunch of hackers. Okay, a lot of hacking that takes place of financial records. Everyone remembers what happened to Target and many others. Everyone remembers what happened to Yahoo and so forth. That comes out of two areas of the world. It comes out of Russia and it comes out of China. Okay, even China, where I think China was able to get into the Department of Defense websites at one point as well, about a year and a half ago. So there's a lot of, so now we have a cyber war going on. I'm going to make a point about that in just a moment. So a lot of our votes and voting records within our states are kept electronically. So you can actually utilize, a computer hacking techniques to hack that, change voting records and the whole nine.
You mean actually change from if someone voted for one person,
yes,
that their vote went to someone else?
You can.
So someone who voted for Hillary Clinton, their vote could have moved over to Mr. Trump, for example?
Yeah, that's easy. Anything electronic, it has an electronic footprint. You can change it. Now, of course, you can trace the change as well, okay? But you can definitely influence it in that way. In addition to what they were doing, they were also, that's one. Secondly, they were creating, and they had thousands of hackers that would take a news piece that would come out, and then they would surround it with a bunch of frivolous and fake news, okay, to make people run after what we call, and I teach in my critical thinking class, red herrings, okay, so to get you off of the trail. It's the same technique that our president is doing now. Anytime anyone focuses on an area that has substance, he then throws out some red herrings or using various rhetorical devices and throw out various fallacies.
Wiretapping, is that a red herring as an example?
It is. Well, the red herring wiretapping is the quotes. But also, I think that he needs to stop watching Fox News like 6 hours a day and start listening to the 17 intelligence committees that we have, agencies that we have. But that's the second way that they were interfering as well. Finally, they had operatives that they have hired in order to infiltrate the U.S. government in order to really destroy it. You're going to see that come out with Paul Manafort when he testifies. And with his information, keep in mind he was hired by a Russian company with ties to Vladimir Putin, given $10 million. Nobody gives you $10 million just because they're having a good day and they want you to have a good day.
Why is Manafort so anxious and eager to come forward then?
Well,
what does he get out of it?
I don't know if he's anxious or eager. So let me take off.
Well, he did say that he would testify though.
Yeah. So let me take off my professor hat and put on my attorney hat now. Okay. So now, these conversations have already been had with individuals who are requested to testify. Okay. The Senate Intelligence Committee, they have 17 witnesses. They've already said released 2, Jared Kushner, who's the son-in-law to the president, and also Matt Flynn. There are 15 others that are going to be released, maybe not publicly, but they're going to call them to testify. So in a way, what ends up happening, if there is something that you're connected to, the DA or the FBI or the U.S. attorney has already had a conversation with you saying that, we just want to have, talk. We found you here. We're investigating this and so forth. And, there are 2 ways to get out of it. Number one, you can cooperate, okay, ask for a deal or ask for immunity, or you can fight it as much as possible, okay. Now, as it relates to what we're dealing with, and I'm going to equate Russia with organized crime. Okay, so with Russia, again, as the former FBI agent testified yesterday, all you have to do is follow the trail of dead Russians connected to this. Okay, my analysis is that I believe we're going to see more of that take place. Individuals come up missing or actually found dead that are attached to this investigation because of what we have. Now, keep in mind, last year, about 6 months ago, I talked about because of the policies that are going to be implemented in favor of Russia or toward Russia, it's going to tip off a conflict between us, and which I believe is going to lead in part toward World War III. These policies, from my analysis in looking at Donald Trump becoming president, they were favoring Vladimir Putin and Russia and their aggression in the Baltics and the Balkans, and more specifically against Crimea and also in Ukraine. So, and keep in mind, Russia, the Soviet Union, they have been terrorizing Eastern Europe for centuries, whether it be Stalin, Lenin, or even, Putin himself. So this is nothing new, for individuals in that part of the world and for what we know. So this is just a tactic of the Soviet Union. We're just seeing it play out now.
440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240 are the numbers to call to join our conversation. We're just doing an analysis of the first 100 days of the Trump administration and trying to look at what has been going on from a historical perspective to keep us all in line and make sure we're paying attention to what's most important. 440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. So if you watch the cable news, you can either be on the right or the left. I mean, they're very polarized.
Sure.
NewsHour honestly, is probably one of the most balanced programs out there in terms of understanding what all of this really means.
Right.
Where else can people look for information that's not going to pull you on one side or the other, but really kind of give you a balanced perspective?
Sure. And now, it's not sexy, but C-SPAN is going to be the purest news that you're going to get, because they're showing the actions happen as they are, straight from the horse's mouth. Okay. Of course, watching I'm an avid C-SPAN watcher, C-SPAN 1, 2, and 3. I love C-SPAN book review, all that. I love it, love it, love it. But I understand that the average person does not. It's like watching paint dry sometimes. And of course, it's kind of like being in class and going through lectures. But what C-SPAN Online has done, cspan.org, and this is c-span.org, what they've done is that they've taken clips of various speeches in meetings that you can watch and click on. For example, I've told my students after the first House Intelligence investigation, where they had the FBI Director James Comey come and testify, Adam Schiff, who's the ranking member on the committee, he gave a 15-minute reading of events that transpired from the summer to now. It's probably one of the most complete transcripts I've heard in a very long time. And I advise everyone to go back and listen to that, just that 15 minutes. And you can hear what takes place. And you can start to ask yourself, again, whether you like the president or not, whether you're a Democrat or Republican, you can say to yourself, this is bad for the country, and anyone that does such thing is not doing anyone any good.
So, healthcare.
Yes.
That was a major debacle. But before we talk about what happened, let's go back and listen to a clip of Mr. Trump talking about what his plan was for healthcare.
Everybody's got to be covered. This is an un-Republican thing for me to say, because a lot of times they say, no, the lower 25%, they can't afford private. But I am going to take care of everybody. I don't care if it costs me votes or not. Everybody's going to be taken care of much better than they're taken care of now.
Well,
right.
It blew up.
Yeah. Well, I chastised the Republican Party because for 8 years, they spewed poisonous, apocalyptic rhetoric about the Affordable Care Act, which, by the way, is a conservative idea from the most conservative think tank, the Heritage Foundation, in order to fix healthcare. You heard me right. It is a conservative idea, which is why President Obama utilized it in order to bring unity to Congress, which, the moment after they had that meeting, they came out and they said, we're going to make him a one-term president, and this is going to fail. So they spewed this apocalyptic, poisonous rhetoric. The entire time they said, we have a better bill. Plus, they put up 60 times in the House to repeal the Affordable Care Act while they did not have the numbers. Well, here's your time. You have total control of the government. You have the House, you have the Senate, you have Congress, and very soon you'll have the president. Then you have the Supreme Court. So they have 8 years, and they try to put together in 8 days, a bill that they have no idea what they're doing, and of course it's going to fail. The Republican Party, which I call the most hip. It is the biggest tragedy of legislative responsibility ever in the history of our Congress, because here you're promising something. Here you're saying something is terrible, which is actually a conservative idea, and you're saying you're going to do better, and you get the opportunity, and you haven't even started to do anything. So they failed the American people. Now,
and then you had the president turn and blame and talk about fighting against their own party. Inside going forward, because they were unable to pass the health care bill.
Well, keep in mind, the Republican Party is not a party of the people. They're a party of big business that have captured the quote-unquote morality voters base in order to get elected. And John Boehner, bless his heart, he's having a ball right now. He did a press conference. He was like, I was in Congress 30 years, and we never passed any health care bill or even put one up to be passed. So I have no idea how the Republicans are going to do this. And he's right. If you look through history, the Republican Party after LBJ has never, ever put up a social program bill for the people. Now, what they are good at doing is cutting taxes for the wealthy. They're good at spending on the military, and they're very good at increasing budgets and privatizing federal government for the rich and the wealthy. There is absolutely nothing the Republican Party does for the poor. Absolutely nothing. So, and the president himself, again, when people say, oh, he's a businessman, we want a businessman in government, I think that was very naive of a lot of people and misguided. Businessmen do not care about the workers. They care about shareholder profits and their profits.
Well, now, Eric, let me push back for a minute, because he did just sign an executive order. He told coal miners this week that they're going back to work.
Okay, well, let me debunk that as well. So, yes, coal mines are going to open back up, but a lot of the coal mining has been automated, which means that you don't need people to go into the depths of as many to go into the depths of those mines because of the ill effects of mining coal, more specifically black lung. Okay. So no, they're not going back to work, and they've been sold a bill of goods. Okay. So it's just not maybe 20 jobs, 30 jobs, even if it's a small town where you have hundreds that used to work in the mines. I mean, that's a hard sell.
And that's deceiving, though, to people who really truly believed when they voted for Mr. Trump that, in fact, they would go back to work.
Well, Barbara, when persons are desperate and when they have no hope, they reach out to anything that grabs their emotions and tell them that it's going to be okay. And that's what he was able to do, And unfortunately, every single thing that he promised them is not going to happen. I'm sorry I'm the one to let you know that, but it's not going to happen. There is no way that you're going to be able to see it. As a matter of fact, you can look at the outline of his budget. He's cutting tremendously, $54 billion from agencies that help the poor, the Department of Education, the EPA, and others that help the poor. And he's moving that toward the military. And there's a reason for that. We'll talk about that later.
Okay, if you're just joining us, we're talking about the progress of the Trump administration as we move towards the president's first 100 days in office with attorney and assistant professor of political science and history at Hampton University, Dr. Eric Claville. 440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240 are the numbers to call to join our conversation. Heather joins us from Virginia Beach. Hi, Heather. You're on the air.
Hi. I wanted to salute Eric for his 3 points that we all need to stay engaged with, as complex as they are. Each one can be broken down. We are a light to the nations when we become and serve as the government by the people and for the people. Our current leadership under this president, who admires a Russian dictator, sheds no light, and he is in the quest of becoming a similar dictator, combining government and business for profit. We are breaking down the laws of the land and our rights and our environment, and we need to stay engaged. And I want to thank Don Lemon on CNN for always having an important conversation. And if you can only spend 1 hour a day following the topic, please follow him. And thanks, Eric, for your wonderful teaching.
Thank you, Heather. We appreciate that phone call. And we also want you to watch PBS NewsHour.
Yes.
Yeah. Absolutely. And listen to NPR. But the point being that there are a variety of news outlets that we need to be paying attention to, so that as an engaged citizen, we can come to our own conclusions, right. One, with the information, but also in some perspective, because perspective is important. If you just looked at every day based on things that have been happening, you can lose your mind. I mean, yes. Because everything takes on such importance that nothing is important. And that's what concerns me is whether with all of this stuff that is happening, will our citizens become more apathetic?
That's very possible, but I'm finishing up a piece I'm working on entitled "Why Donald Trump is the Best Thing to Happen to America and the World."
Really?
And my premise around that is what Donald Trump has done. He has shaken up the political system and he's shaken up the world. Not so much in a positive way, but he's shaken individuals up in order to wake up. Okay, to find out exactly what's happening and to be more engaged in politics, more engaged in public service and in the public sector. The caller mentioned, I want to thank the caller for her comments, but she did mention something about us not being a light, but rather darkness to the world. And there is a piece that was written in the New York Mag on November 18th, 2016. And as Steve Bannon is entitled, Steve Bannon says, "Darkness is good, as is deficit spending." Steve Bannon is the chief advisor to the President of the United States. He's also known by others as a white nationalist. He says he's an economic nationalist, but he doesn't care if he's known as a white nationalist either. But Steve Bannon says this is his quote: "Darkness is good," Bannon tells Wolf. "Dick Cheney, Darth Vader, Satan. That's power. It only helps us when they get it wrong," speaking of Democrats and liberals, "when they're blind to who we are and what we're doing." You have a man here that's quoting Satan and admiring Satan for his power. You have a president that admires a ruthless thug dictator named Vladimir Putin.
Okay, so let's talk about the things that are happening within the United States that the president is changing. The EPA was one.
Yes.
Missing out on the health care bill was another. The divide still within the country in terms of the racial divide and so forth. What are the signals? What are the things that we need to say, whoa, wait a minute, we really need to pay attention to this? And if we're paying attention to it, what do we need to do in order to make a change?
Sure. So first of all, you have to take a look at White House executive orders. White House executive orders also have the power and the effect of law made by Congress, which are legislative statutes. If you look at the very first executive order signed by the president, the first is to build a wall on the U.S.-Mexican border. Mm-hmm. And also he's promising that Mexico would pay for it. Mexico denied that they were paying for anything, and it's not going to happen. And what's going to end up happening is that the United States taxpayer is going to end up paying for that wall. But every single expert, even those within his administration, have said that a wall makes no sense without policy behind it, to really affect and help what's called illegal immigration. Unfortunately, the Mexican people have been the face of illegal immigration, and they're really not. Mayor Bloomberg stated last week, he said, "We have between 500,000 to 600,000 illegal immigrants in the city of New York. The vast majority of those come from China and other Southeast Asian countries." Okay. He also stated that if we deport all those illegal immigrants, the New York City economy would collapse the next day. That tells you just how much we rely upon cheap labor and individuals in the country that are not documented to work for us. As a matter of fact, one of the president's cabinet members, we'll talk about in a second, his cabinet was, he had to remove himself from being considered because he had an undocumented domestic working for him. Yes. So hypocrisy at its highest level, as we see. Of course, the travel ban that was put into place, which was basically a Muslim ban. The president himself said it was, which is what the U.S. federal judges utilize in part to state that those travel bans, in order to place the injunction on those travel bans because of the unconstitutionality of them. So they're there, but they're going to work their way through an appeal process and possibly up to the U.S. Supreme Court, which is very important to see how Neil Gorsuch gets to the Supreme Court when he does and how he rules on this. However, you have that, which also infuriated individuals in various parts of the world. And then finally, you have the EPA. White House executive order. The EPA White House executive order, which is one that decreases regulations for companies in order to pollute. We know that, and you have individuals who are over the EPA and who are very, very apologetic in a way and to corporations for us forcing this farce of climate change down their throats. Okay. Climate change is real.
I was going to say, Eric, why is there still debate today over whether or not climate change is real? I mean, when I listen to pundits and those who, and even the head of the EPA saying, we really can't say that man is causing this issue. What is it going to take for everybody to get on the same page with that?
Well, keep in mind, everyone's not going to be on the same page, all the page, until something actually happens. And when something happens, they'll blame something else, right? But all the experts agree, and we see it, that climate change itself is a dramatic event that is impacting our world. Even when we started burning tons of coal during the turn of the last century of the Industrial Revolution, we know that putting those carbons in the atmosphere was causing damage to our ozone layer and also causing the Earth to heat up faster. What we see now are irreversible effects of our abuse of this world that we've been given to take care of. First, you see the Arctic glaciers that are melting. We have an Arctic glacier the size of Rhode Island that's getting ready to break off. Okay, now it's going to float. It's going to disrupt shipping channels, which is our trade throughout the world, and also is going to melt, which causes the sea level to rise. On this station, this NPR affiliate, that was just a commentary about the rising sea levels in Norfolk. Norfolk is ground zero that the federal government, Hampton Roads is ground zero that the federal government has identified to show the immediate effects of sea level rise, more specifically as it relates and affects the naval base that we have, the largest naval base in the world here in Norfolk, also the shipping industry that we have here, which is one of the most busiest ports, and finally the shipyard. Now, the sea level has risen here in Norfolk by 15 inches, okay, since we started paying attention to this. Every bridge that's being built, every road that's being built now close to the naval base is being built higher. There are some roads now, we're talking 15 to 20 years. This is the estimate given. 15 to 20 years, we're going to see those roads covered with water every day at high tide. As I was traveling here, I pay attention to the bridge and seeing it, and I'm saying to myself, how much longer? We don't have much time before we see various feet of our waterfront.
So if we can
taken over
physically see this happening, why in Washington then are they still saying it's not happening?
Sure. Well, you say they in Washington is actually the individuals who are over that Trump has put in place over these various agencies.
That's what I mean by they.
Because they're attached to big business. Okay, big business says let's make profit first, let's deal with the after effects later. In a way, because those issues will not affect you if you have resources and money. Okay, it's going to affect the poor people. Climate change is it is really a national security interest for the world and a lot of nations, especially those in the Philippines. Though a lot of those small nations in that area are going to disappear. They're going to go underwater. We have Native American reservations on the coast, more specifically northwest United States, over in Alaska and also in Washington, that
Not
are now
to mention
moving
what
in.
happened in New Orleans with Katrina. I mean,
we're going to have cities.
See all of that.
And the question is, do we abandon those cities? Now, just think and ask yourself, if the Navy leaves Hampton Roads, what will happen to our economy?
Yeah.
If the shipping industry leaves, what will happen? So we have a very, very hard decisions to make. They're not easy, but we have to make them, and we can no longer play with this issue.
440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. We're talking about the first 100 days of the Trump administration and where we are as a nation. Rebecca joins us from Gloucester. Hi, Rebecca. You're on the air.
Yes, ma'am. How are you today?
Okay. How are you?
Well, I would just like to say that I concur with the professor's analysis that people are realizing what's really important to them, whether it's immigration, important and affected by immigration, the environment, LGBT, transgender rights to go to the bathroom. I think that the Americans are going to band together and be a united front in 4 years and put American people first. So I think it's going to be a values election, and we're going to get back to what we need to be successful as Americans: clean air, clean water, equal rights for all Americans.
Okay, thank you, Rebecca, for the call. Do we have to wait 4 years? Eric?
No, we don't. We actually have midterm elections coming up in 2018. We also have a governor election coming up as well this year here in the state of Virginia. So you don't have to wait in 4 years, but I understand what the caller is saying, and thank you so much for your comments, caller, because in 4 years we elect another president to lead the country. But my trepidation with waiting those 4 years, and I understand the average citizen believes they only have that chance that one person, one vote at that time period. However, I believe that we're heading toward a collision course that we cannot turn away from as it relates to conflicts across the world. When I was here 6 months ago, I talked about the actions and the policies toward Russia and also what's happening in China, which is very quiet. I think we're headed toward a three-front conflict, world conflict, which will propel us into World War III. I believe that we're going to have a conflict in the Southeast Asia realm of the world, where China is now asserting their dominance in that area of the world and also in the world itself. Secondly, I think we're going to have an issue with Eastern Europe in a conflict with Russia and NATO and their aggression toward former Soviet blocs. And then we're going to have a ground conflict as well in the Middle East, where I believe Syria is going to be ground zero, where you have the factions that are fighting toward not just the government of Syria, but also ISIS and ISIL. And those are three different wars that we're fighting. And then finally, I think we're going to have an issue in cyber warfare.
Cyber warfare. Okay, explain.
Sure. So at the 6th hour and probably the 15th minute of James Comey testimony with the House, that was a female U.S. congressperson that stated that Russian meddling in our elections is a serious thing. And most, if not all, congressmen agree. She stated that this is an initiation of cyber warfare initiated by Russia upon the United States. Okay. Those are some very powerful words. It was a very quick statement, but it's very powerful. And I believe that's very true because the way you can debilitate a nation, you no longer have to shoot a rocket, but you can shoot a missile or virus through the computer system and destabilize or debilitate.
You can take out the electric grids, you can take out water, you can take out the functioning of a country.
You can. And I also think that we are more so, we're not going to get missiles launched at us. That's not my belief. But I think that we're more apt to get to be attacked by an EMP missile, electromagnetic pulse nuclear attack. And those are missiles that go into the air atmosphere and they explode. And then what it does, it knocks out electrical grids. This was a study that was done almost 20 years ago. The report came out the same day that the 9/11 report came out, but didn't get a lot of airplay because of 9/11. But electronic magnetic pulse, EMP attack, is something that I think we have to pay attention to. And the United States is extremely vulnerable to that type of attack. North Korea, they're testing missiles to go straight in the atmosphere. Iran is testing missiles to go straight into the atmosphere. And Russia also, who was 30 miles off the coast of Norfolk, by the way, not too long ago, a Russian ship, also have the capability to send those missiles up. So when you knock out the electromagnetic grid in the United States, whether it be through our airplanes, which if your electric grid is knocked out in an airplane 30,000 feet in the air, it becomes a flying brick at that time. And yeah, you're gonna crash and die. You can knock out our water system, our electrical system, our cellular system, and pretty much everything. So ask yourself, what happens with a nation if you can't get fresh food, water for 72 hours? What happens in 7 days? What takes place in a city where people cannot get those necessities to live in 21 days?
And we've seen that because when you look back at Katrina, for example, that is exactly what happened in terms of trying to get help to those people.
You're exactly right. I was there. I'm from Louisiana, South Louisiana, and we saw it. And that's something that I believe that we're going to possibly see if we don't reinforce our electrical grids, which Congress has the opportunity to do it. It costs about $5 billion to do that now. But we have an opportunity to do that. And I think that's something we need to pay attention to.
So in the 4 minutes that we've got left, when we have a president who communicates through the latest technology, through tweeting, we have a lot of noise around a lot of different things that people seem to make a big deal of. Sean Spicer and his press conferences, as an example, and the back and forth, the combativeness of the administration with the press, and all of that. What do we need to do as citizens to kind of beat through that so that we really can be paying attention to these very serious issues that you've raised?
The average person, you're not going to get the ear with the president of the White House. But what you can do is get an ear with your representative here that represents you, whether it be in Virginia, North Carolina, Alaska, whatever the case may be. You can also band together with those individuals that come and knocking on your door asking to vote. You can band together with them and say, these are the issues that we're concerned about, and let us know what's really happening. And make those individuals accountable to you, okay? And keep in mind, we have an opportunity to replace our representatives every 2 years. It happened in Richmond, where Eric Cantor was a representative, and it's supposed to be where Paul Ryan is, but you got Dave Bratt now, who's a professor and now U.S. congressman. So holding individuals accountable, make sure you stay vigilant, make sure that you stay read up, okay? We don't read a lot, but if you don't have time to read in depth, like a lot of us who are in academia and in journalism, pay attention to C-SPAN. I love PBS NewsHour, and I love, just looking at giving the information as we see it. And finally, history. I urge all of our guests to go back and look at Watergate and what took place, what transpired during the Watergate time period, what transpired during Vietnam, and what transpired during the civil rights movement and the civil disobedience that we had and the riots in various cities. And ask yourself, are we headed there? I think we can divert a lot of this, but we have to be active. We can't have closed mouths about this, and we have to be willing to stand up and say, you're not acting presidential, you're not being presidential, you're actually doing us more harm. But also, I want people to realize that Steve Bannon is probably the most dangerous person in the White House other than Donald Trump, because his entire agenda is to bring down the administrative state. He's said it many times. People just don't pay attention to him, think he's a crazy guy. But he's very smart, and his idea is to destroy the United States administrative government and really to allow anarchy in what we have. So unfortunately, that's his mindset. And part of the budget, if you look at the president's recommendation for the budget, actually does that. The arrogance and the lack of care that his operatives have in malarkey when he talks about we're taking monies away from Meal on Wheels, after school lunches for kids and so forth, saying that it's not proven that it works. So you want to make sure a kid is hungry and think they're hungry, they're going to do better, and pump that money into defense. To me, it just shows a lack of care. It shows a lack of heart toward people. And I think individuals should step aside their political ideology and belief and say, listen, it's time to have a heart for each other, because if we destroy each other, then we have nothing left.
Absolutely. Eric Claville, it is always a pleasure to have you here with your Claville Report. Your analysis and insight is always just spot on. So thank you very much for joining us, and we will be having you back soon.
Thank you, Barbara.
And we will be right back.
Hi, this is Essie Patha-Murkerson from Law and Order. You are listening to Another View.
And welcome back. Throughout the month of March, WHRV aired locally and nationally produced programs and stories that explored current issues surrounding modern-day education. The initiative was called Educationally Speaking. On Thursday, Another View examined the challenges our African-American boys face when it comes to their studies. We also looked at some possible solutions. Our Lisa Godley recently visited 2 programs in Portsmouth designed to give Black boys a leg up when it comes to both their education and life in general.
For the Male Leadership Mentoring Academy, please meet in the library immediately following morning announcements.
Within minutes, about 8 fourth graders at Parkview Elementary eagerly took their seats ready for their next session. Today's task, write something kind about each other.
One of the hardest things for young men to do
is find something nice about someone else.
about another young man.
Portsmouth School Board member Cardell Patillo started his mentoring and tutoring program focusing on African American males in the 4th and 6th grade at 2 Portsmouth elementary schools.
I think it needs to be more community involvement. We put too much pressure on teachers and educators, and really we still need the parents to do their part and also for the community to do their part to help raise our children. It takes a village.
But Patillo's Male Leadership Academy does more than provide these students with a role model. He also makes sure they're exposed to things they'd otherwise only hear about in class or read in a textbook, like the group's field trip to City Hall and the state capitol.
So who is the top executive for the state of Virginia?
Governor.
The governor. All right.
Governor McCullough.
Governor Chairman McCullough, great. We cover their academics, make sure they're doing well in class as far as their work is concerned. We track their behavior while they're in school, and we also do different activities from peer mentoring to character trait development, also how to handle conflicts within school divisions amongst peers and even with family.
While he's only been at Parkview and John Tyler a year, Patillo has been mentoring students in Portsmouth for the past decade because he knows it changes lives.
Something that he's taught me is that we will be leaders when we grow up, and we will lead all the other kids in the right direction instead of the bad direction to getting suspended.
I had some of my students, they would average 3, 4, 5 suspensions a year, and some of them haven't been suspended at all this year. And I think it's largely in part of the involvement with the mentoring program and partnership with the school division.
Across town at Wilson High School, another program impacts the lives of teenagers.
To be early is to be on time. To be on time is to be late. To be late is to be unacceptable.
For the nearly 36 young men who make up Wilson High School's Presidential Men's Academy, being a part of this group has been life-changing. Nathaniel Purdy calls PMA a driving force that keeps you focused.
It exposed me to a lot, like friendship and being able to trust people, and it showed us that it's other stuff outside of Portsmouth. There are things that you can do that other people say you can't do, but it's people behind you that actually believe that you can do it.
Johnny Young describes his experience this way.
It brought me out of my shell. I was really quiet when I started off in this group. And it inspired me to be a better man, a better citizen. Now my role is to mentor other men out there to be prepared for the life that's out of high school.
One of the group's founders, Curtis Williams, says PMA started with a conversation between himself and another teacher, Paul Wilson, who wanted to do something to help the young men at Wilson.
We got kids that needed mentoring, shy, grades, and we had some kids that are really, really smart. So we had a mixture of a whole bunch of boys. And we based it on the number of presidents that are in the United States.
Geometry teacher Stephen Small is also a PMA mentor.
Having a male figure is very, very important. I think it definitely helps for those who have someone to look up to, someone to say, hey, this is not the way, you could do better. Someone to say, okay, you're struggling, it's okay. Here's how you pick yourself up.
To participate, you have to maintain your grades. But Joshua Brown says if you need help, there's plenty of it.
Last year I was struggling a little bit, but this year I take advanced placement classes, and they've helped me out a lot in being successful with those. Last year, over spring break, we went up and visited Georgetown University, George Mason University, Howard University, and it just really got me into really wanting to go to college.
Where do you want to go?
I'm thinking about either JMU or Virginia Military Institute.
For Another View, I'm Lisa Godley.
Wonderful programs for young men in our area. And if you'd like to hear our Another View special, Educating Our Black Boys, please visit our website, anotherviewradio.org, and download the podcast. You can also listen to today's show or any other Another View program of your choosing. We're on Facebook, so like us, and I'm on Twitter at Barbara Ham Lee. And I hope you're enjoying streaming us live. We also tried it on Facebook yesterday, and so that worked out very, very well. Next time on Another View, we answer the question, does a black film have to be negative or violent in order to be Oscar-worthy? Join us for a riveting discussion. Our theme music was composed and performed by Jay Sennett. Lisa Godley is our show producer. Victor Bowen is our audio engineer, and Jada Baden answered our phones. I'm Barbara Ham Lee. Thanks so much for listening to Another View.